All right, this video is meant to give you some more explanation on how to do the Module 2 discussion. In the past, I've been told I have too much detail and I give too much information. However, based on the results and the questions that I'm receiving from the Module 1 discussion, I'm starting to think for some people that might not be the case, and some people might need some more explanation. So that is what this video is for. If you've read the prompt and you understand it, there's no need to watch this video. But if you still think you might have questions, let me explain. First of all, let's talk about carrying capacity. You can read all about it on page 108. Carrying capacity in the scientific sense is the number of organisms that a certain ecosystem can sustain. But in this context, if we're talking about the human population growth, then carrying capacity is the number of humans that the Earth can sustain, right? So you can tell from reading the textbook that our population is increasing, right? And eventually, because of that, we're going to have a problem, because eventually we will hit our carrying capacity. We don't exactly know what our carrying capacity is, but eventually we will hit it. Therefore, we have two things that we can do to address it. We can either slow down human population growth, right? So we don't hit carrying capacity, or we can make the carrying capacity larger, right? So let's say hypothetically carrying capacity right now, let's say Earth can hold 10 million people, right? Hypothetically. So then what other ways what could we do to make it sustain more than that, more than 10 million or billion, excuse me, billion. So that's what the question is asking, right? You have to choose one of these two and offer a solution on how we can either reduce human population growth or increase the number of people the Earth can sustain. I want to focus on this really quick. It says reduce human population growth, all right? So we're not talking about killing people. We're not talking about reducing human population. We're talking about reducing human population growth. You can think about this in terms of money. So let's say you have a bank account and every year you add 1,000, or let's say 1 year you add $1,000 to the bank account. Next year you add $1,100 to the bank account. Next year you add $1,300 to the bank account. Obviously your bank account is growing a lot. And not only is your bank account growing, but so is the amount of money that you put in every year. Now let's talk about sort of the opposite of that. Let's say you have a bank account and 1 year you put in $1,000, and then next year you put in $900, and next year after that you put in $800. Your bank account is still growing. It's just growing a little bit slower because you're putting a little bit less in. And that is the concept we're talking about here. Reducing the population growth means we're still adding people to the human population, just not as many as we used to. So keep that in mind when you answer the question. And again, not to beat a dead horse, but I want to make sure you understand it. Your choices are reduce human population growth or increase the carrying capacity, right? You're going to write about one of those two things. And again, you need to have an idea of how to do that. So don't just say, I think we should reduce human population growth. Give me an idea of how you want to do that. For example, you could say something like, I think consenting adults should be allowed to duel, right? Because that would reduce human population growth. That would actually reduce the human population, right? Because people would be dying. But anyway, it would also affect the human population growth. Obviously, I use that as a crazy example, but I did that on purpose because I don't think any one of you would suggest that in your prompt or your discussion. So anyway, choose a solution how we can do one of those two things, and only make sure it's one possible solution. So again, don't say, I think we should reduce human population growth and list all these different ways to do it. Just pick one, because I want your classmates to be able to also have their own unique ideas. So pick one solution, and then every solution, every idea has its advantages and disadvantages, right? Then normally it would be beneficial to list all the advantages and all the disadvantages. But in this case, to keep it simple, just list one advantage of your idea and one disadvantage of your idea. And again, the reason for that is because, first of all, I want to keep it simple for you. And also, I want to give your classmates the ability to respond, so they can respond with more advantages and more disadvantages. And now you see I gave an example here. One possible solution would be to require every person to eat only the number of calories they burn that day, right? So that would reduce the demand of resources, right? So that could increase the carrying capacity. Let's talk about advantages and disadvantages. One reason this is a good idea is it could decrease the number of resources we need. One reason it's a bad idea is many people don't have the technology to properly determine how many calories they burn. It's that easy, right? So just pick something, explain one reason why it's good, one reason why it's bad. And then when you respond, you're going to do the same thing. Because like I said earlier, you only pick one reason that it's good, one reason that it's bad, because your classmates can then list some advantages and disadvantages. So when you respond, still, just list one advantage and one disadvantage. And this is important to note too. This is just a thought exercise. So your idea doesn't have to be feasible or ethical, or even sane. So like my idea was, like I said, or my hypothetical idea was to allow dueling between consenting adults, right? I'll let two consenting adults fight to the death if they want. That's not really feasible, probably, or ethical, depending on your ethical points of view. But for the sake of this discussion, you could talk about it, and you could list the advantages and disadvantages. And again, like it says here, it's just a thought exercise. We're not really trying to figure out ways to actually that would actually work. We're just like brainstorming. And it says, as it says right here, the purpose is to be able to utilize critical thinking. You should be able to identify the disadvantages of ideas, even if you agree with the ideas. Likewise, you should be able to identify the advantages of ideas that you disagree with. So again, that's the beauty of brainstorming and the value of conversations like outside of this class, just in society. This is why you should be able to openly converse and exchange ideas and not shoot people down just because you don't like their idea. Because their idea, as bad as it might be a springboard to a better idea. Anyway, and then finally here, for grading purposes, you need to demonstrate that you understand the concepts of carrying capacity and population growth. So just like the last discussion wasn't really that much about coal, right? The real purpose of that was to demonstrate that you understand the different ethical points of view. Well, the real purpose of this discussion is to demonstrate that you understand the concepts of carrying capacity and population growth. That being said, where are we at here? How can you do that? Well, you could at least demonstrate that you understand the idea. You have to at least define carrying capacity, right? So according to the textbook, this is carrying capacity. And then you can relate that definition to your possible solution, right? So going back up here to my hypothetical idea, one possible solution would be to require every person to eat only a number of calories, blah, blah, blah. So I could make this better if this was an actual post, this sentence right here. One reason this is a good idea is that it could decrease the number of resources we need, therefore increase carrying capacity. And then here's where I could change it. Carrying capacity, which is, and then define carrying capacity, right? So you need to do that. Now, even if your idea is about increasing carrying capacity, you still need to demonstrate that you understand population growth. So you need to at least define it and at least basically talk about how your idea is related to it, and vice versa. Even if your idea is about population growth, you still need to demonstrate that you understand carrying capacity. And of course, as always, you need to provide a reference, like a link that'll actually work that I can go check. And you need to make it obvious how you used it. So, up here, going back to my hypothetical idea, I could put one reason this is a bad idea is that many people don't have the technology to properly determine how many calories they burn. And then maybe I could look it up and say, according to, Fitbit.com, only X percentage of Americans know how many calories they eat per day, something like that. So that's the end of me explaining, hopefully thoroughly, how to do Module 2 discussion. So if you've read the prompt and you've watched this video and you still have questions, please just contact me. Maybe we can, we can exchange emails, or we can meet online and we can just have a conversation one-on-one, and I can explain it to you and answer any questions you might have. Thanks.